The waiter looked lost. That's what struck me first. Not my missing seat, not the fact that my name card was lying face down next to a half-empty glass of red wine I didn't pour, but the way the poor kid in a white shirt and black vest hovered with a bottle of Merlot in one hand, like he didn't know who to serve next because the man of the house wasn't part of the equation. I stepped into that ornate candlelit banquet room at precisely 6:59 p.m. because I respect time and saw it all in one scan. The flowers, the lights, the guests dressed like it was the Oscars, and one single gaping absence at the end of the table, where my chair should have been, where I always sat for the last 17 years. She saw me, of course, my wife, well, the woman I used to think of as my partner. She tilted her head, gave me that practiced smirk she reserves for parties and deflections, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Guess you'll have to stand. We ran out of chairs." Then she laughed, like it was cute, like it was a sitcom. And right on cue, her mother gave a delighted little clap, and her brother chuckled with a mouthful of foie gras, and even her damn cousin Mark, the one I bailed out of his crypto mess, let out a wheezy snort. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink, just looked around, nodded once, and said, calmly, because what's the point of raising your voice in a room full of hyenas? Guess that means I'm not family. And I walked out, clean, no theatrics, just the sound of leather soles on marble and a silence that spread like spilled wine. If you've ever felt that shift, the moment you realize you're not wanted, just used, then you know exactly what that walk felt like the last few tiles of a long hallway snapping into place. And if you're listening right now and you haven't hit that moment yet, but something's been gnawing at you for years, stick around, because more than 90% of people hear stories like this and never subscribe. But this channel, this story, it means something. And your support tells our team we're not alone in this mess. Back to the scene. I passed the hostess on the way out, and she tried to hand me a glass of champagne. I held up my hand politely. She looked confused. "Aren't you Mr. Curtis?" she asked. I just kept walking. Out in the parking lot, the winter air hit like a slap. I didn't mind. I unlocked my car, sat inside, and closed the door. No music, no phone, just silence and the buzzing neon sign of the country club reflected in my windshield. You know what's funny? I wasn't even surprised. Not really, because this wasn't the first time. Not even close. This was just the most public insult, the most intentional. What they don't know, what she doesn't know, is that I didn't walk out in shame. I walked out in confirmation. Because 2 nights ago, I'd already packed a file into my briefcase, labeled Final Round. Because 4 months ago, I started moving accounts, quietly, legally. Because last Christmas, when I watched her mother open the watch I paid for and say, "Oh, you shouldn't have," to my wife, I started seeing the game for what it was. I wasn't the guest of honor's son-in-law. I was the wallet with legs, the handyman, the one who could fix the water heater, grill steaks, and keep his opinions to himself when her cousin told racist jokes at the lake house. The chair missing at that table wasn't an accident. It was a message, and I heard it loud and clear. So I drove, not home. Place doesn't mean what it used to. I drove to a cabin I'd leased under my own name 2 counties away. Nothing fancy, just mine. The wood stove was already warm, the fridge was stocked, and the burner phone I'd bought was fully charged just in case. I lit a fire, sat down, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked. So did the little security feed from the house. She was still laughing, still sipping wine like she'd won something. Let her laugh. They always do, until the floor shifts. And the floor will shift because I've got the bank records, the trust documentation, the consulting payments funneled through my business accounts that float her family's fantasy lifestyle. I know who signs the checks, and I know who actually controls them. You don't show a man he doesn't belong at the table unless you're ready for what he builds once he's off it. And I've been building. Thanksgiving 2010, her father carves the turkey like it's sacred, and I'm balancing 3 trays of food in from the kitchen because the caterer canceled last minute. Her mother watches me set everything down and laughs. "You missed your calling, Daniel. You'd make a great butler." I smile. Of course I smile. What else are you supposed to do when your wife doesn't even flinch? Christmas 2015. The whole family's at that cabin up north. 4 bedrooms, 5 couples. I paid for the rental. Her sister and her husband get the master. Her parents get the guest suite. Her cousin, the one who can't drive sober, gets the one with the fireplace. And me, I sleep on the fold-out in the den next to the dog's crate. She tells me it's just for 2 nights. You don't mind, right? I say no, but I remember. 4th of July, 2018, her brother, newly divorced, shows up last minute to our beach rental. I booked it, paid for it, stocked the fridge. She turns to me and says, "Can he use the car today? You don't need it, right?" I hand him the keys. He calls me Dan the chauffeur at dinner. They all laugh. I watch the waves instead. It goes like that, year after year. There's a version of me, a quieter one, a more naive one, who thought being the man who handled things would earn me a seat at the table. I fixed their pipes, filed their taxes, co-signed loans, helped her brother after he torched his credit, gave her cousin a job after she lied on her resume and got fired from her dream role. No one thanked me. No one asked me if I needed anything. I was a useful ghost. Even at home, I felt like a tenant with a tool belt. When the garage door jammed, I fixed it. When the roof leaked, I patched it. When her mom wanted to redo the patio, I drew up plans, bought the materials, and spent 2 weekends laying bricks while they sipped white wine and posted it as their family project on Facebook. I was tagged once, no caption, no smile. And when I did say something, when I brought up how maybe we could skip her cousin's wedding for once, or how her mother constantly undermining me in front of the kids might be, a problem, she always had the same response. "They're just joking. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive, that word's a knife. Because what it really means is shut up and take it. It means your feelings inconvenience the family image. It means she'll defend them, not me. So I stopped talking, stopped asking. I started listening instead. I paid attention to who laughed when I was mocked, who looked the other way when I was brushed off, who conveniently forgot to include me in the family group photo, even though I was the one paying for the photographer. And slowly, the pictures started to look different. I used to see a family. Now I see a hierarchy, a club I was allowed to fund but never join. Her mother used to say, "We're so lucky Daniel's handy." Her father called me reliable. Her sister once told a neighbor, "He's more like our family accountant/lawn guy than an actual husband." You'd think at some point I'd explode, yell, slam a door, but I didn't. I'm not built that way. Instead, I filed it all away. I printed emails, saved receipts, took screenshots of her brother's emergency Venmo requests, compiled statements from the joint account she thought I didn't monitor, kept PDFs of tax filings where I claimed every single dependent I was unofficially supporting, because I realized something: silence is underestimated. People assume quiet means weak, but it also means watching. And I watched them build a little kingdom on my back, smiling all the way, until one day I opened an old photo album on my laptop, clicked through the years, and asked myself a question I should have asked a long time ago. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anything fall apart? And the answer was yes. Everything. The house, the finances, the trust fund her mother boasts about, the nonprofit her sister runs out of a space I lease under a shell LLC. Even the wine they were drinking at the birthday party came from a case I ordered through my corporate account, labeled as a client gift. I'm not just part of their system. I am the system. They just forgot that. But I didn't. She thought I was outside. That's the part that stuck with me later. She knew I took my conference calls in the garage because the home office had become too cluttered. Her words, not mine. And because she needed the space for her vision board. So she assumed I'd be out back like always. She didn't even lower her voice. "Of course he'll come," she said, with that snort laugh she reserves for her sister. "He's too polite not to." There was a pause, then muffled chuckling on the other end. Her sister replied, clear as glass through the stairwell vent, "Make sure he sits near the kitchen again. Classic. Maybe give him a little name tag. Daniel the doorman." More laughter. My wife added, "I should have married someone with an edge. But hey, dependable pays the bills." Then the call switched to logistics. Which cake tier her mother would like, whether her cousin's new boyfriend would cause drama, if the restaurant could move the weird artwork off the walls. I stood frozen, hand resting on the rail, the wood still warm from the sun. My ears burned, but not with shame, with something colder, crisper, understanding. It wasn't the jokes. I'd heard those before. It wasn't even the chair placement or the smug condescension layered beneath every phrase. It was the certainty in her voice. The unwavering belief that I would just take it. I turned and walked down the hall toward my office, or what's left of it. She'd converted half into some Pinterest-born creative corner with affirmation cards and a Himalayan salt lamp that buzzed near outlets. My desk was intact, though, the filing cabinet locked. I sat, exhaled once, opened the drawer, and pulled out the folder. It was black, labeled in silver ink, contingency. Inside were 4 years of notes, not rage-fueled scribbles or dramatic escape plans, just cool, methodical outlines. My lawyer helped with some of it, my accountant with the rest, not because I told them anything was wrong, I just said I wanted options in case something ever went sideways. Smart men plan for rain while the sky is still blue, the trust I created after my mother passed. Originally structured to benefit our family. The clauses were vague, per my wife's request. Too vague. So I drafted amendments. Quietly, I had the power to restrict distributions. Temporarily, indefinitely. The consulting firm her brother used to pay himself a salary while doing absolutely nothing for my company. I was the majority stakeholder, always had been. I just let him think he had a say. The nonprofit lease her sister bragged about locking in at a miracle rate. The miracle was me. It was mine. Held through a shell company listed under my college roommate's umbrella firm. None of it was illegal, none of it shady, just unspoken. The family always assumed my silence meant permission. It didn't. It meant patience. I clicked open my laptop and began typing. First, I contacted the CPA, told him to initiate phase 1 of the asset separation. Nothing official yet, just preparation. Then I drafted the notice of lease termination for the nonprofit space. Not dated, not signed, just ready. I canceled the automatic transfer to her brother's account, the one labeled family business allocation. He'd text in a few days. I wouldn't respond. And then I made one more call, not to a lawyer, not to a friend, to myself. I pressed record on the voice memo app and said aloud, 2 days before the party, my wife laughed about placing me near the kitchen. She said I was too polite to make a scene. That's what they're all banking on. Silence. Endurance. Pause. That ends Saturday. Click, save. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even for revenge. It was a timestamp, a marker, a reminder to myself that sometimes when a man has been pushed far enough, he doesn't need to fight. He just needs to stop carrying everyone else. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity, like I'd just opened a window in a musty room I'd been sitting in for years. Let them laugh at the seating chart. Let them polish the silverware and rehearse their little toasts. Because the man they think they're mocking, the harmless, reliable background character, just flipped the script. And they won't hear the new ending coming until it's already on the last page. Derek's office hadn't changed in a decade. Same walnut desk, same ugly ship painting above the bookshelves, same ridiculous orchid his assistant insisted was good for feng shui. But I didn't come for the ambiance. I came because Derek doesn't ask questions unless you want him to. He's the kind of accountant who makes things happen with minimal noise. No lectures, no moral commentary, no raised eyebrows when a man says, "Let's quietly shift some assets." He offered me coffee. I declined. "I'm short on time." Derek nodded, already pulling up files on his screen. "You finally pulling the pin?" I smirked. "You could say that." For years, we'd had a standing understanding. If I ever needed to simplify, his word, not mine, he'd be ready. Simplify the ownership trail, simplify the liability exposure, simplify the exit path. And now, sitting across from him, I was finally activating every clause we drafted in theory but never touched. First step, personal asset separation. I wasn't interested in removing her from anything. That's the trick most men miss. You don't yank the rope and make noise. You let it slip, little by little, until they look down and realize there's no lifeline anymore. I was removed from joint liabilities. My name came off 2 accounts, the ones used for social events and family expenses. Credit card ties severed, ownership stakes reassigned. Her card still works. But the payment source, that's mine. And it now has a valve. Next came the trust. Originally built from my mother's inheritance, meant to be a legacy fund for descendants and affiliated causes. Sounds generous, right? Too generous. Derek helped me redraft the beneficiary structure. The new version? Performance-based disbursement, metrics, accountability. If her brother's consulting firm doesn't meet revenue benchmarks, payments pause. If her sister's nonprofit fails to file quarterly reports they never even knew they owed, funding halts automatically. We weren't revoking anything, just tightening the faucet, subtly, legally, without warning. Then came the linchpin. The company her brother consulted for, that was mine. Technically, legally, structurally. Years ago, I'd absorbed it during a merger and left it running with minimal oversight, partly out of laziness, partly because I thought keeping him busy meant fewer family dinners filled with startup pitches. But that company had one critical contract, a monthly stipend paid out under legacy service agreements, which her brother, sister, and even her mother had grown to rely on like clockwork. Rent, groceries, vacations, all of it ran through that pipeline. Derek pulled up the ownership ledger. You still hold 100% of controlling interest. Want to transfer it? Yes, I said, then clarified, not sell, just move it. To? I handed him a card, a name, an entity I'd created last year after a particularly humiliating Easter dinner. She'd made a joke in front of her entire family about how I used to wear clearance shoes before she upgraded me. Everyone laughed, including the waiter. The entity's name? Shoestring Holdings, LLC, because I have a long memory. The transfer was processed. The contracts remained intact, but now they had a new point of contact, an entity not legally bound to their assumptions. No more familial guilt. No more loophole they could lean on. Derek looked up from his monitor. You sure you want to keep this quiet? I nodded. They don't need to know I'm gone until they feel it. He slid the paper across the table. Finalized. Signed. Dated. Anything else? He asked. I hesitated, then said, send them their Q1 forecast, like normal.
No changes yet. He raised a brow but didn't push it. That's what I pay him for? I folded the single sheet and slipped it into my inner jacket pocket. Walking out of that office, I didn't feel power drunk. No gloating, no fantasy about them crying when the money dries up. What I felt was peace in knowing that for the first time in 17 years, I held something they couldn't laugh away, not because I took it, but because I was always the one holding it. They just forgot. Now, when they sit down to that birthday dinner, smiling over catered soufflés and free champagne, they'll toast to family unity, and the foundation they're standing on is already mine and already shifting. He's probably sulking, my wife said, swirling her wine as the waiter brought out the third course, some overpriced fig salad they'd all pretend to like. You know how he gets. Always so dramatic. She rolled her eyes and chuckled, and that was the signal. The others joined in, all too eager to laugh along and minimize the man who just quietly walked out. They made a sport out of my silence, they always had. But something about that night made it particularly smug, like they believed my absence confirmed something they'd whispered for years. He's not really one of us, her mother used to say, with a faux concerned smile. He's just convenient. So they joked, they drank. Someone made a toast to resilient wives, and her cousin Belinda clinked her glass just a little too hard. Everyone laughed louder than necessary. They were padding the room with noise, insulation against the silence I'd left behind. Then her brother's phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it. He was too busy charming the bartender talking about some startup he was advising, but it buzzed again and again, 3 messages in a row. Finally, he glanced down, frowned. Strange, he muttered. The monthly hit didn't go through. What hit? Someone asked. The consulting payment, he said, scratching his jaw, from Daniel's company. It always lands on the first. It's automated. Her sister laughed. Please, he probably paused it because he's throwing a tantrum. But her brother's face didn't match her tone. He was pale now, scrolling through his banking app. No, it's not paused. It says authorization revoked. What does that even... Then Belinda gasped. What the hell? She was holding her phone like it had insulted her. The condo account is overdue. I set it to autopay last year through the family account. Why would it be overdue? Someone tried to make a joke, but it landed flat because now people were checking their phones. Her sister got up from the table, excusing herself as politely as panic allowed. She was making a call.
to the nonprofit treasurer. Her funding pipeline had just gone dry, not paused, not delayed, pulled. And the thing about these people, they don't like talking about money in public unless it's to brag. So when their financial oxygen starts to thin, they don't scream, they whisper, their eyes dart, they excuse themselves. The party gets quieter inch by inch. Even her mother noticed the shift. "Why is everyone acting like someone died?" she asked, her voice thick with annoyance. "This is a celebration," her daughter tried to calm her. "It's nothing, just some glitch with the transfers." But the look on her face betrayed her. She was realizing it wasn't a glitch. It was something worse, intentional. Someone asked, "Where did Daniel go anyway?" No one answered, not because they didn't know, but because suddenly the answer seemed dangerous. They were beginning to understand. This wasn't sulking. This wasn't a tantrum. This was something coordinated, precise. And it started before he walked out. At the far end of the room, the birthday cake sat untouched. The sparklers were timed to go off at 8:30. The band was still scheduled to play, but now people were canceling rides, checking balances, whispering questions they didn't want to say too loud. Why would the payments stop? Why all at once? Why today? And most important, how much control did Daniel really have? A nervous murmur rippled through the guests. The ones who always treated him like a footnote now stared at their phones like they were holding detonators. Still, my wife laughed again, weakly. "He'll come back. He always does." But even she didn't believe that this time. She could feel the vacuum forming in the center of the table where I used to sit, not just physical, but financial, foundational, because they all forgot something basic. A man who doesn't belong at your table might just own the building it's in. And tonight I started turning off the lights. If you've made it this far, you're just getting to the good part. More than 90% of people listening never subscribe. But if you're hooked now, and trust me, you will want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button. It helps us tell these stories the way they deserve to be told. And the next part, that's when things really start to burn. The first call came at 11:13 p.m. I let it ring out. The second one followed 10 minutes later. Then the third, each from a different number. My wife's cell, her mother's landline, then her brother's burner phone he always forgot to pay the bill for. I didn't pick up any of them. The cabin was quiet. That kind of sacred quiet you forget exists when you've spent your adult life in a house full of people who mistake volume for love. No appliances humming, no background TV noise, just the soft creak of timber, the snap of the fire, and the occasional howl of wind pushing against pine. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. French press, no sugar, no cream, just heat and clarity. The burner phone lit up again. This time I listened. Not answered, just listened. "Daniel, hey, I think something's wrong with the payments. Maybe a banking issue? Can you call me back when you get this? I'm sure it's just a tech hiccup." Beep next. "Dan, it's Mom." Well, her mom. "Look, honey, I know we joke a lot, but don't take it to heart. It was just a seating thing. We didn't mean anything by it. These things happen at big events. Let's just talk, okay? We can fix this. We're family." Beep next. "Daniel, it's me. Please don't make this into a thing. You walking out made everyone uncomfortable, and now the others are freaking out about some money stuff. If something's going on, just say it. Don't ghost your own wife. That's childish." Beep. Each message sounded a little more brittle, a little more rehearsed, like they were trying out tones to see which one would pull me back. Concern, confusion, condescension, like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see which manipulation sticks. What they didn't realize, what they never realized, is that the man they thought would always fold, always be the bigger person, always swallow the insult for the sake of keeping the peace, had finally discovered the difference between being strong and being used. I didn't erase the messages. I forwarded them, each one, straight to my lawyer. He'd know what to do with them. Pattern of emotional leverage. Timeline of acknowledgement. Maybe nothing would come of it legally, but that wasn't the point. It was about record keeping, control, narrative. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 4 emails marked urgent. One of the emails from her sister had no greeting, just, "You can't do this to us." I stared at the screen for a moment, not angry, not even surprised. Us. There it was again, at the implication that I wasn't a person. I was a power source, a utility, a platform for their comfort. Another email came in as I was reading that one, this time from her cousin's boyfriend, the one I barely spoke to, who had the audacity to write, "Can you just clear this up before the fundraiser? It's putting her in a bad spot. No hey, no hope you're well, just instructions. Entitlement disguised as confusion." I closed the laptop, went out to the porch, sat down with a wool blanket and my mug, and watched the trees move like a tide of old ghosts. No one yelling, no one rolling their eyes, no one asking for a favor wrapped in guilt. I'd bought the cabin a year ago under an LLC named Black Pine Retreats. It wasn't even in the marital property filings. Why? Because somewhere deep down, I always knew there'd come a day when I'd need space that was mine, not just in name, but in energy. Here, the phone could ring all it wanted. It couldn't reach me. And you know what happens when manipulators lose their target? They panic. They spiral. Because power, to them, isn't in love or respect. It's in access. And I just revoked it, not with a scream, not with a slammed door, but with peace, real peace, the kind that comes when a man realizes he's no longer tethered to the emotional marionette strings of people who never saw him as human. Let them call, let them whimper about mistakes and misunderstandings, because when someone shows you who they are for 17 years, and you finally believe them, you don't go back. You go quiet. And in that quiet, you finally start to hear your own voice again. By the time the manila envelope arrived, the party had already curdled into a hangover of unspoken questions. People lingered in little cliques, voices low, eyes darting toward doors, and waitstaff like someone might walk in and restore the fantasy. The restaurant manager approached her, my wife, with the envelope like it was radioactive. "This was delivered for you, handed off by courier, said it was urgent." She took it with a nervous glance, expecting maybe an apology note, maybe a peace offering, because in her mind the script was still salvageable. She still thought I'd come back with my tail between my legs and offer some dramatic monologue about feeling unseen. Instead, she opened the envelope, and the room went silent. Not gradually, immediately, like the oxygen got sucked out of it. The first page was a list of terminations. Item 1, all scheduled payments to Legacy Family Consulting, effective immediately. Item 2, automatic monthly disbursement to Blackstone Nonprofit Initiative revoked. Item 3, rental lease termination notice for 42 East Hamilton, effective end of quarter. Item 4, trust amendment clauses modified under Section 5.3 to require independent audit. On and on it went. 24 entries, all cross-referenced, notarized, and timestamped. Clear, clinical, surgical. Every single gift they had quietly counted on was being unwrapped in reverse. People leaned in to read. My wife held the packet like it was vibrating in her hands. Her sister peered over her shoulder, eyes darting, whispering furiously. And then, right on top of the last stack of documents, the sticky note, small, yellow, unmistakable handwriting. "I paid for the seat. You decided I didn't deserve it." She read it aloud, couldn't help herself. Maybe thought it would land as sarcastic or petty. Instead, it echoed. A few people winced. One waiter stopped pouring champagne mid-glass. Her mother cleared her throat. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" But no one laughed, because the pages didn't feel like a joke. They felt like judgment. Her brother, now sweating visibly, flipped to the back page and muttered, "This is a full financial extraction." Her cousin clutched her phone, typing furiously, no doubt checking account balances she used to ignore. Someone in the back whispered, "Was this always his money?" And that's when the shift happened. Not in volume, in posture. People stopped looking at her for answers. They started looking around her. She sensed it. Her voice got tighter, shriller. "He's just upset. It's symbolic. This isn't legal." But her aunt, the one who'd once called me a quiet workhorse, interrupted. "These are contracts, Jennifer. Signed, witnessed, filed. This isn't a tantrum. It's a takedown." Jennifer, not Jen, not Sweetie, her name like a court record. She started flipping through the papers again, faster this time. A desperate shuffle, Like if she moved quick enough, maybe she could erase the words. But they were there. Final, cold, no yelling, no revenge fantasy, just a man using the tools he built for everyone else. Finally for himself. The power dynamic didn't flip in a lightning strike. It shifted in a whisper. In the way people stopped meeting her gaze, the way her cousin quietly gathered her purse, the way her sister turned her phone screen away. Because the unspoken contract had been severed. Daniel was never supposed to walk. He was supposed to stay, to absorb, to fund, to carry, and when he didn't, the architecture of the family mythology cracked. She stared at the note again. I paid for the seat. You decided I didn't deserve it. It wasn't bitterness. It was a mirror. And everyone at that party was now staring into it, seeing what they'd really built, and who they'd built it on. It started with a missed cue. The caterers were supposed to bring out the flaming creme brulee with sparklers while the band played a slowed-down jazz rendition of Happy Birthday. That was the plan, the performance, the image. But instead they hesitated at the kitchen doors, whispered among themselves. Then the head server approached the table, and bent down to speak directly to my mother-in-law. We're going to need a payment method before we continue. She blinked, smiled like he'd just told a bad joke. It's already been arranged. He didn't smile back. No, ma'am. Your credit card was declined. Twice. Now that got the room's attention. You could practically hear the forks pause midair, the clink of glass suspended. Her mother's smile twitched, the sort of twitch that lives right between confusion and fury. That's impossible. My son-in-law handled all of this, the deposit, the final balance. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. But the payment source was recently revoked. We were told to request full payment on site going forward. The word revoked echoed like a cough in a funeral home. Her eyes darted across the room, looking for Jennifer, my wife, the one who had promised her that this party would be flawless, that she had everything under control, except now the control was gone. And Jennifer? She was still sitting with that envelope clutched like a lifeline, blinking at the fine print like it might rearrange itself out of mercy. The waiter gave them another minute, then stood up straight and said, I'll inform the kitchen we're pausing service until payment is settled. Then he walked off. And just like that, the orchestra stopped. Not literally, but in spirit. Conversations dipped into silence. Faces turned toward the head table. A few guests reached for their coats, not dramatically, but casually, as if they'd just remembered somewhere better to be. Then the photographer stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Before I start on the group portraits, I'll need the outstanding balance handled. We were told Daniel Curtis would be covering the full shoot, but our file now lists a status of client terminated. My mother-in-law didn't understand that phrase, didn't want to. This is my daughter's party, she hissed. She'll handle it. But Jennifer didn't move. And then came the moment, the real collapse. The mother, once the architect of this picture-perfect family, the queen of the birthday court, the woman who once said, my family runs like a Swiss watch, expensive and precise, stood up, her voice loud enough to cut through the murmurs. You embarrassed us. Jennifer looked up. Her mother's face was flushed now, her eyes glassy with rage. You let him slip through your fingers. You couldn't even keep that man happy. Gasps. Real ones. No one moved to stop her. No one even pretended it was a private moment. She kept going. You thought you were better than him. You let us treat him like help, and now look. The whole thing's collapsing. This party, the funding, everything. Jennifer finally rose to her feet. Mom, stop, but her mother cut her off. You thought his silence meant weakness. It meant control. He built this, and you let him walk out over a damn chair. The silence that followed was brutal, exposing, because she wasn't wrong, and everyone knew it. A man in the corner, someone's +1, muttered, guess he was more than just the quiet husband. Someone else added, I'd leave too. The room had turned, the narrative flipped. No one cared about the cake, or the sparklers, or the family slideshow that was supposed to play on loop. They cared about the story of the man who was always there, until he wasn't, and the women who mocked him until they needed him. People began leaving, not in a rush, but in quiet clusters, Apologies mumbled. Hugs skipped. RSVP regrets edited in real time. By the time the candles were lit, the few that were, only half the room remained. The rest had finally realized this wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. The knock on the cabin door came just after noon. I knew it was her before I opened it. The kind of hesitation in the knock, like someone trying to sound soft but carrying too much rage in their knuckles. I waited, let her knock again, this time faster, louder, almost angry. When I opened the door, she stood there in designer sunglasses and a coat too thin for the mountain air. She looked out of place, out of practice, like someone who hadn't walked into a conversation without an audience in years. "Can I come in?" she asked, already stepping forward. I didn't answer, just let the door swing open and turned back toward the fire. She walked in like she still lived here, like she still knew me. Her boots thudded awkwardly on the wood floors. She glanced at the stone fireplace, the bookshelves, the neatly folded blanket on the couch, all untouched by her. "This place is nice," she said softly. "It is. You've had it this whole time?" I didn't answer. That wasn't a real question. That was guilt fishing for something to grab onto. She sat down, didn't take her coat off. She began, her voice wobbling a bit. "I don't understand. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stirred my coffee. She leaned forward. "Daniel, seriously, the party was for my mother, not you. You made it about yourself." I looked at her for the first time since she walked in. "You removed my chair, I removed my support." She blinked like she wasn't sure she heard me right, then scoffed. "It was a joke. God, you're still being dramatic." "You said that at the party too," I replied. "Right before your brother's payment bounced, your cousin's lights went out, and your sister's staff called in a panic." "I didn't mean—" "Yes," I interrupted. Calm. Still. "You did. That's the point." Silence. She looked down at her hands, twisting her rings. "This doesn't have to be this," she said. We can fix it. We can figure something out. I'll talk to everyone. No," I said. You wanted distance, so I'm giving it to you." She looked up sharply. "What do you want from me?" I stood up, walked to the small drawer beside the fireplace, and pulled out the folder. A single sheet of paper inside. No drama, no yelling, just closure, printed in legal formatting. I handed it to her. She didn't take it right away. "What is this?" "Divorce terms." She stared. "No alimony, no split assets. You keep what's in your name. I keep what's in mine." Her lips parted. A protest loaded but not fired. "And your family," I added, "gets nothing. No reinstated payments, no deals, no trust redistributions." Her hand finally touched the paper. She scanned it, eyes darting, pausing. She swallowed. "There's a clause," she said. "Non-disclosure? One condition," I said. "Silence. You don't spin this. You don't tell your family some sob story about how I snapped. You don't float rumors at brunch about emotional abuse or cold husbands. You leave this as quietly as you ignored me." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because somewhere between the signature line and the envelope in her lap, she understood this wasn't an invitation to negotiate. It was the last courtesy I was willing to extend. She stood up, still holding the paper. "You really hate me that much?" I looked her in the eyes. "No, I don't hate you. I just finally believe you." She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't have to. She folded the paper once, then again, pressed it flat with both hands like she was trying to erase the creases of her own choices. "I'll need time to—" "You have 3 days." A pause. She opened the door without another word, and just before she stepped out into the cold, I said, "Close it behind you." She did. Not a slam, not a click, just a quiet end. And that was the first time, in years, the cabin truly felt warm. It was exactly 32 minutes after I'd walked out of the party. They were between the final toast and the delayed dessert course when the restaurant manager, a composed, balding man with the posture of someone who's dealt with far too many entitled customers, approached the table with a folded note in one hand and a corporate credit card in the other. He cleared his throat softly and addressed the room. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice crisp. "Mr. Curtis just called and requested all pending charges for this event be reversed. The card on file has been canceled. As of now, the event is no longer covered. The remaining balance of $12,428 is due immediately." The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was stunned. There's a difference. Her mother blinked rapidly. Her sister opened her clutch and pulled out a black Amex like it was a sword, only for the manager to shake his head. We were instructed not to accept any alternative payments associated with Curtis Holdings. Any attempt to use affiliated cards will be declined. I'm afraid we'll need a new, unrelated method of payment or, he glanced down, the event will be paused and services discontinued. Someone actually gasped, not out of drama, but because this wasn't supposed to happen. Daniel Curtis was supposed to be dependable, predictable, a background fixture with a wallet, not a ghost with wire cutters. Her cousin mumbled, "That has to be a mistake." But then the phone started buzzing. First one, then two, then the whole damn table like a hive waking up at once. Bank alerts, transfer cancellations, scheduled payments reversed, auto deposits marked flagged and suspended. Her brother's face drained. What the hell? Her sister said nothing, just stood up and walked toward the back of the restaurant with her phone pressed to her ear, lips tight. The band quietly stopped playing. A waiter removed a half-eaten entree mid-bite. The entire party fractured like a frozen pond under too much weight. And my wife? She sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the spot I used to occupy. The one she left empty. Her mother finally exploded. "You let this happen!" But no one yelled back, because yelling required some kind of confidence, some belief that they could still win, still spin this. That belief had evaporated. They didn't know yet that the company her brother depended on had already filed retraction notices to all vendors, that the lease to her sister's nonprofit office would expire in 30 days with no renewal clause, that the trust, the one they'd all quietly tapped into for years, was now undergoing a full audit under a third-party administrator with zero ties to the family. All they knew was this: the man they never respected had left the room and taken the floor beneath them with him, not through drama, not through vengeance, but through removal. Daniel Curtis wasn't storming back in to demand apologies or redemption. He wasn't waiting outside in a car hoping someone would chase him down and beg. He was gone. Completely. Permanently. Strategically. And every unpaid invoice, every frozen account, every suddenly worthless connection they clung to, that was the receipt. At the head of the table, the birthday cake still stood uncut, waxy candles burning down to nothing. No wishes made, no applause earned, just silence. And across the mountains, in a warm cabin built on years of quiet calculation, Daniel took one last sip of coffee, shut his laptop, and smiled. Not because he won, because he finally let go, and they would never be able to pretend he didn't matter again.